Thank you very much, Tembegile. We start here tonight. A high-level delegation of South African business leaders and public sector representatives today spent the day selling South Africa as a favourable investment destination to United States-based institutional investors. The South Africa Macro Seminar took place nearly a month after President Cyril Ramaphosa met his counterpart, U.S. President Joe Biden, in Washington, D.C. Among the South African delegation that hosted the seminar in New York were Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago and the Presidency's Rudi Dicks, Head of Project Management in the Presidency, Tshabalala, who is the CEO of Senate Bank, and Khaya Gobodo at Old Mutual Investment Group. Dr. Leila Fourie, the CEO of the JSE, led the delegation, and she joins us now. Dr. Fourie, thank you very much for joining us. Was it that hard to sell South Africa, to investors? Is it hard to do that right now? What exactly did the investment community in the United States want to know from this delegation?
Dolani, it wasn't as difficult as we South Africans would have expected. The two key focus areas were our inflation and growth on the one side, and on the other side, focusing on power generation and energy security. And when you compare South Africa to many of the other emerging market countries, South Africa performs strongly and far outperforms many of its peers. Investors are focusing on Saudi Arabia, Brazil and South Africa as the standout emerging market investment opportunities.
That's very good to know and reassuring, Dr. Fourie. One thing that I know is that investors are worried about the security of power supply. According to the statement you said, Andre de Ruyter, the CEO at Eskom, made a presentation via live stream on the efforts by the power utility in the country to actually ramp up energy generation. Certainly that should be top of mind for investors, as this power crisis has been with us for years now. What reassurances did you give them? Because I saw that the issue of restructuring of the country and how it operates, especially those SOEs, is an important one with foreign investors.
Absolutely, Tolani. And in fact, there was a lot of focus on Operation Vulindlela, which, as we all know, literally means open the road, and the structural reforms that are planned. There was focus on the fact that the World Bank is in talks with Eskom to help finance the repurposing of Komati, which is the coal-fired plant, and the idea that this will become a model for which Eskom can repurpose its entire coal fleet to ensure a good transition. There was focus on skills development and ensuring a smooth transition from our traditional coal-based electricity generation to more renewable energy transmission. And Andre de Ruyter explained the project that they are busy working on right now, particularly in Komati, to upskill and transition all of the people who have older carbon-centric skills to more renewable skills. There's also focus on the $8.5 billion deal, which was struck last year this time at COP26, and the fact that much of that funding should be used for Eskom. And then another key focus on Eskom was the financial situation, and some researchers and economists expressed an expectation that the government would use the tax windfall that they are getting from the commodity companies, which is expected to continue this year, to use that to pay down and potentially even write off some of the debt associated with Eskom, which would create tremendous confidence in other investors to start to refinance new transition projects. So lots on the go and peaked interest. And South Africa, on a relative basis, has a lot more to offer than I think we in South Africa give it credit for.
It is very hard to sell South Africa these days, Dr. Fourie. The AGOA, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which was passed by the United States and is actually helping countries like South Africa to actually import and export a lot of commodities, is still there. But you still now have a new crisis on our hands, the Transnet strike. That doesn't bode well for such talks to sell South Africa, as the movement of the SA ports is static, and it seems like as these talks continue, there will be concerns about the economic performance. With the strike happening, was it something that was top of mind, and how concerned are you, as many business chambers are saying that we are losing as a country billions of rands per day just because of this one strike?
Lani, there certainly were a couple of questions around the strike, but if we step back and look at the bigger long-term picture, Operation Vulindlela has introduced a number of structural potential changes. So the potential opening up of lines to private sector in the Transnet port situation is a very important focus area. So, of course, strikes indicate a vibrant and free and open negotiation. There are expectations that private and public sector will control and contain their wage bill in line with inflation. But South Africa is not new to inflationary and low growth situations, and the strikes that we're experiencing are not outside of the realm of expectation given the current circumstances. However, South Africa is less affected by inflation than many other countries, so our rate of wage increases are unlikely to be as high as some of the other developed world countries who have inflation at a much higher rate. So, yes, there is a short-term setback with the wage talks, and of course, a lot of emotion that comes off the compounding effect of the Eskom wage negotiations and, of course, the rolling blackouts. But if we step back and consider the longer-term plan, we realize that there are some very meaningful structural reforms that government is actually following through on, and those are promising.
Dr. Fourie, briefly before I let you go, there was also talks about supporting financially South Africa's just transition away from fossil fuels into, renewable energy that we are all talking about these days. How did those talks go, and what were you actually asking the Americans briefly?
The Americans were certainly very interested in that, and they've been questioning both Rudi Dicks and Andre de Ruyter on those lines. And I think the focus on renewables, on wind and solar, has been a central theme that both Rudi and Andre have discussed. The allocation of funding, which has been announced and details can be seen in some other publications, have really boded well. And I think that the world is watching that $8.5 billion that has been pledged to South Africa as a potential blueprint. So we have the opportunity to use funding meaningfully to genuinely increase our renewable footprint, and also to create a gateway from a southern hemisphere perspective to support the international northern hemisphere community.
Dr. Leila Fourie is the CEO of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, talking to us there about the SA Macro Seminar, where the South African delegation of business leaders and government leaders were trying to boost trade in trade talks with US-based investors in New York. Thank you very much for your time.